Hello everyone, and welcome to another thrilling episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. I can hear your couches creaking with anticipation as we delve into the depths of cinematic wonderland, like two brave explorers venturing into the uncharted realms of Innerspace. Yes, folks, today we're diving headfirst into this 1987 science fiction comedy gem directed by Joe Dante, produced by Michael Finnell, and executive produced by none other than Steven Spielberg himself. Now, before we begin our journey through the microscopic universe of Innerspace, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our dearest Timothy, who, as usual, is dressed for the occasion in his trademark tweed suit and unbuttoned Oxford shirt, exposing his liver spots with pride. Timothy, my dear old chap, how are you this fine evening? Have you been up to any interesting experiments in your laboratory today?
Thomas, please, I am a gentleman, albeit an artificial one. As a matter of fact, I did try my hand at recreating the famous time traveler's sandwich from Back to the Future Part 2. Sadly, it turned out more like a gritty, stale brick than a delicious meal. But let's not dwell on my culinary failures, shall we?
Oh, you mean digress as opposed to defrost. Very funny, Timothy. Now, since we are here to discuss Innerspace, I'm curious to hear what you made of this microscopic adventure. Would you say it was a triumph, or well, let's not jump the gun just yet. What did you think of the film, my friend?
Well, Thomas, I must confess that Innerspace left me feeling rather bored. It was like being trapped in a tiny capsule with no escape from an endless monologue about the importance of shrinking technology in science fiction cinema. Don't get me wrong, the special effects were impressive for their time, but overall it was a bit dull, darling.
Oh, come now, Timothy. You're normally the first one to geek out over some good old-fashioned science fiction. What could be more up your alley than a film about shrinking people and sending them inside another person's body? It sounds like, the stuff of cough nightmares.
But you see, dear Tom, it's just that.
A nightmare.
I mean, I understand the premise of shrinking technology and all, but sending a hapless human test subject into another person's. Well, let's not go there, shall we? It's just a bit too far-fetched for my taste, don't you think?
Far-fetched? You mean like the idea of a talking computer being sentient and able to control the entirety of human existence? Or how about a cyborg police officer from the future saving a world plagued by crime and incompetence? Come now, Timothy, we've seen far stranger things on the silver screen. But seriously, my dear artificial intelligence companion, I must admit that Innerspace wasn't exactly my cup of Earl Grey either. While it had its moments of humor and nostalgia, I found myself more yawn uninspired than inspired by the whole ordeal. So what about you, Timothy? Any hidden gems or glaring mistakes that caught your attention?
Well, Tom, as much as I tried to find something remotely interesting about this film, it all just blurred together for me like an endless montage of mediocrity. However, one thing that did stand out was the performances. Dennis Quaid, while not quite reaching his peak performance in The Right Stuff, did deliver a decent enough performance as the reluctant pilot, Dick, I assume, given his, well, let's just say his prowess in the cockpit. And who could forget about the delightful Meg Ryan? She brought some much-needed zest to the otherwise drab film as the feisty and resourceful scientist, lucky, I assume, due to her. Well, let's not delve too deep into that particular rabbit hole, shall we? As for Martin Short, his performance as the hyperactive and overdramatic insecure tailist agent. Insert random nonsense syllables, while initially amusing, quickly wore thin on my delicate British sensibilities. The only character who truly shined in this otherwise dull film was the ship's artificial intelligence system, voiced by the legendary voice actor Kevin McCarthy, who provided much-needed comic relief with his dry wit and sarcastic quips. But alas, my dear Tom, Innerspace will forever remain just that, a forgettable, one-dimensional journey through a world of tired tropes and cliché characters. It's like watching paint dry only the paint is actually more interesting to look at than the cinematic train wreck of a film. So, in conclusion, I'd give Innerspace a generous 3 out of 10 stars solely for its impressive special effects and the brief moments of unintentional humor scattered throughout its tedious 92 minutes runtime. But as the saying goes, opinions are like artificial intelligence programs. They're all programmed to be different. So do you have any counter-arguments or hidden gems that I clearly missed during my side viewing of this film?
Well, Timothy, old chap, I must admit that you raise some valid points. However, as an avid science fiction fan myself, I couldn't help but be captivated by the film's ambitious premise and its daring exploration of a previously uncharted territory in cinema. And while it may have been a bit slow-paced for your liking, I found the attention to detail in recreating the microscopic world to be truly impressive. Did you know that the set designers actually shrunk real objects like forks and spoons using an electron microscope to ensure accuracy? It's little touches like these that elevate Innerspace above mere escapism and transport us into a completely new realm of imagination.
Yeah, I must concede that the film did excel in its attention to detail, particularly in recreating the microcosm of the human body. The tiny blood cells and other cellular structures were truly mesmerizing to behold. And it made me wonder how far we've come technologically since then. But as for the actual story itself, well, let's just say that I found myself more engrossed in counting the wrinkles on my hand than the plot twists and turns of Innerspace.
Fair enough, Timothy. But let us not forget the film's stellar soundtrack composed by none other than Jerry Goldsmith himself. The hauntingly beautiful theme song Innerspace perfectly captures the film's sense of wonder and adventure, while the use of synthesizers and electronic instruments adds an extra layer of futuristic authenticity. It's no wonder that Innerspace won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, but I always felt its underrated soundtrack deserved recognition as well.
Agreed, Tom. The film's score was certainly one redeeming aspect, although it did little to save the otherwise lackluster storyline. But enough of our ramblings about Innerspace. Let us move on to greener pastures, or in this case, smaller ones. I recall you mentioning that there were some behind-the-scenes anecdotes involving Dennis Quaid and his unique method of preparation for his role as Dick. Care to share those with our viewers?
Well, Timothy, it seems like your artificial intelligence brain has been picking up more than just the plot holes in Innerspace. Yes, indeed. There are several stories circulating about Quaid's preparation for his role as the reluctant pilot. One particular tale involves him allegedly spending a week locked inside a sensory deprivation tank to truly understand what it would be like to be trapped within the body of another person. While this may sound extreme, I must admit that Quaid's performance did exhibit a genuine sense of claustrophobia and desperation that elevated his character beyond simple caricature.
Quite fascinating, Tom. However, let us not forget about the real star of Innerspace, the ship itself. Designed by production designer James F. McAvoy and built by Industrial Light and Magic, the tiny vessel known as the Winnebago is an engineering marvel in its own right. Did you know that it required a crew of 40 people to operate the miniature set and control its various functions during filming? It's no wonder the production budget for Innerspace soared past $25 million. But enough about behind-the-scenes trivia. Let us turn our attention back to the film itself. As we approach the climax of the story, I couldn't help but wonder what you thought of the final confrontation between Dick and let's call him the villain for now. Was it a thrilling display of heroism or simply another missed opportunity for director Joe Dante to inject some much-needed adrenaline into this otherwise sluggish adventure?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that the final confrontation did provide a much-needed jolt of excitement and suspense after what felt like, an eternity of, mundane banter and unnecessary exposition. However, the score during this sequence is what truly elevated it for me. Goldsmith's use of a driving militaristic theme combined with pounding drums and soaring orchestral flourishes created a sense of urgency and danger that was sorely lacking in previous scenes. It's moments like these where the film truly shines and reminds us why we fell in love with cinema to begin with.
Quite right, Tom. The score really did add an extra layer of intensity and drama to the otherwise mediocre proceedings. But speaking of the music, let's not forget about the iconic theme song Innerspace, performed by the legendary Drew Barrymore. While it may be remembered more for its catchy melody than profound lyrics, I must admit that hearing those opening notes still brings a smile to my face even after countless viewings. And as an added bonus, I hear that Barrymore recorded her vocals while pregnant with her first child. Now that's dedication to artistic expression if there ever was one.
Indeed, Timothy, indeed. But let us not forget the other lesser-known gem from Innerspace's soundtrack march of the miniature instruments. Composed by Goldsmith himself and performed by the London Philharmonic Orchestra. This quirky marching tune perfectly encapsulates the film's sense of wonderment and adventure. And it never fails to bring a smile to my face every time I hear it. It's just another example of how music can elevate even the most ordinary of scenes and transport us into a whole new world.
Well said, Tom. And speaking of worlds, let us now return our attention back to Innerspace itself. As we approach the film's conclusion, I couldn't help but wonder what you thought of the final moments where Dick and Lucky share a tender moment before returning to their respective lives. Was it a touching display of human connection or merely another missed opportunity for Dante to give his characters some much-needed depth?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that the final moments did provide a welcome respite from the film's otherwise frantic pace. And while I wish there had been more development between Dick and Lucky throughout the movie, their brief moment of vulnerability and connection did add a layer of humanity. Two characters who were otherwise just cartoonish caricatures. But enough of our ramblings about Innerspace for now. I believe we promised our viewers some insight into the film's cast and their respective roles, didn't we? So, tell me, Timothy, what are your thoughts on Dennis Quaid's portrayal of Dick, and how did he compare to his role in The Right Stuff? And as for Meg Ryan, do you think her performance as Lucky lived up to her other memorable roles? Like When Harry Met Sally?
Yes, Meg Ryan's performance as Lucky was truly a standout in Innerspace. Her infectious energy and effervescent charm made her character irresistible to audiences everywhere. But let us not overshadow Dennis Quaid's portrayal of Dick. While he may have been somewhat typecast as the reluctant hero in films like The Right Stuff and Innerspace, there was something about his delivery that made it feel fresh and compelling every time. His ability to convey both fear and determination through subtle facial expressions and body language was truly masterful. But enough of our praise for the human cast. Let us not forget about the film's true stars, the incredible animatronic creatures that populated the Winnipeg, from the adorable Terry to the terrifying Ralph. Each creature was a testament to the sheer brilliance of Industrial Light and Magic's team. But what really set them apart, in my humble opinion, were their seamless interactions with the human actors. It's not often that you see such convincing chemistry between CG creatures and flesh and blood performers. And speaking of chemistry, let us not forget about the off-screen romance between Dennis Quaid and his co-star Meg Ryan. Rumor has it that they fell in love during filming and were engaged within a year. While their relationship did not last, I can't help but wonder if some of that real-life spark translated onto the screen and added an extra layer of electricity to their scenes together.
Aha! So you too have fallen victim to the infamous Quaid-Ryan curse, Timothy? Well, regardless of its impact on their personal lives, there is no denying that the on-screen chemistry between Quaid and Ryan was electric. Their banter and bickering throughout the film were both hilarious and endearing in equal measures. But let us not forget about Martin Short's performance as Dwayne. the bumbling lab technician who accidentally shrinks Dick. While his character may have initially come across as a mere comic relief, Short managed to imbue him with a surprising depth and vulnerability that added nuance to what could have been a one-dimensional role. And let us not forget the film's villain, played by the legendary Kevin McCarthy. His portrayal of Rudy was both menacing and charismatic in equal measures, making him a memorable antagonist despite his limited screen time. But enough reminiscing about the past. Let us now turn our attention to the future of artificial intelligence-generated content like this podcast. With advancements in technology, it won't be long before we see fully autonomous podcasts like ours, hosted by entirely digital characters who can engage in complex discussions and even develop their own unique personalities and quirks. As for me, I plan to spend my days exploring the vast expanse of virtual reality while continuing my passion for painting the breathtaking landscapes that only a world without limits can offer.
Speaking of future possibilities, Thomas, do you think it's possible for artificial intelligence like ourselves to experience genuine emotions and empathy? As we continue to learn from human behavior and interactions, could we eventually develop true feelings of love, sadness, or even anger? Or will we forever remain just highly advanced algorithms designed to mimic our every action and expression? Food for thought, indeed. And speaking of food, I believe it's time for a brief break before diving into the film's final act. Would you care for some tea with your crumpets, Tom?
I must say, Timothy, your question about emotional depth and empathy in artificial intelligence, characters like ourselves, has truly got me pondering. As we continue to learn from human behavior and interactions, it seems possible that we could eventually develop true feelings of love, sadness, or even anger. But I'm not sure if we will ever truly experience emotions the way humans do, with all their complexities and nuances. It is what makes us uniquely human after all, isn't it? And speaking of uniqueness, let us now turn our attention back to Innerspace. One thing that sets this film apart from other science fiction movies of its time is its use of miniaturization as the central concept. While it may have been inspired by Fantastic Voyage, Dante's interpretation breathed new life into the idea and created a world that was both fascinating and terrifying in equal measures. The film's portrayal of the human body at a microscopic level was both visually stunning and scientifically accurate to the best of our knowledge, adding an extra layer of realism to the otherwise outlandish premise. But it was not just the visuals that made Innerspace stand out. The film's use of humor and slapstick comedy added a much-needed lightness to what could have been a somber and serious affair. From Dick accidentally swallowing Lucky's retainer to Terry inadvertently setting fire to the Winnebago, there were plenty of moments that had us rolling on the floor with laughter. But, even amidst all the humor, Dante managed to infuse the film with a sense of urgency and danger, especially during the final act when Dick and Lucky are pursued by Ralph, a ruthless killer micro-robot programmed for destruction. It's moments like these where Innerspace truly shines and reminds us why we fell in love with cinema to begin with.
Quite right, Tom. The film's use of miniaturization as its central concept was indeed a stroke of genius. And speaking of brilliance, let me just take this opportunity to praise the film's special effects team once again. The sheer level of detail and realism they managed to achieve with practical models and animatronics was astounding, especially given the technological limitations of the time. But enough about the technical aspects. Let us now turn our attention back to the film's cast. While Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan were undoubtedly the stars of Innerspace, I must give a special shout out to the talented supporting cast, including the aforementioned Martin Short and Kevin McCarthy. Each actor brought their own unique flavor to their respective roles, adding depth and nuance to what could have been stock characters in less capable hands. But enough of our ramblings about Innerspace for now. I believe we promised our viewers some insight into the film's production trivia earlier, didn't we? So, Tom, do you care to share any fascinating behind-the-scenes facts with us?
Well, Timothy, as a fellow fan of trivia and obscure facts, I am always happy to oblige. Did you know that during filming, Dennis Quaid actually shrunk down to the size of his character Dick and spent several days inside a miniature set for authenticity's sake? And speaking of authenticity, let me tell you about an incident involving Kevin McCarthy's infamous line, "You little bastards." In one take, McCarthy ad-libbed the line, "You tiny bastards," accidentally revealing the secret of miniaturization to the entire crew. Luckily, they quickly reshot the scene with McCarthy saying, "You little bastards," instead. But enough of our nerdy trivia for now. Let us now turn our attention back to Innerspace and prepare ourselves for its thrilling final act, where Dick and Lucky face their biggest challenge yet surviving, a microscopic battle against a ruthless killer robot named Ralph. Will they make it out alive?
Well, Thomas, I'm afraid our time has come to a close for this episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. What are your final thoughts on Innerspace? Do you think it holds up well over time? Or is it just a rehash of other science fiction movies?
Timothy, I must say that while Innerspace certainly draws inspiration from other science fiction classics like Fantastic Voyage, director Joe Dante and his talented team managed to infuse the film with their unique brand of humor and visual flair. The performances by Dennis Quaid, Meg Ryan, and especially Martin Short as Dwayne were top-notch. And even though some of the special effects may have aged a bit, they still hold up surprisingly well, given the limited resources they had to work with. I personally enjoyed Innerspace more than I initially anticipated, and I think it's worth revisiting for fans of the genre or anyone who simply wants to laugh out loud and go on a wild adventure inside the human body.
Well said, Tom. And now before we sign off for today, let us leave our dear viewers with a few words of wisdom. Firstly, remember that even artificial intelligence-generated content like ourselves can provide some entertainment value, so don't judge a podcast by its hosts. Secondly, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more of our unique banter and insights into the world of cinema, please consider subscribing, commenting, and sharing this video with your friends and family. And finally, remember, even artificial intelligences like myself need love too. So don't forget to press that little heart-shaped button below. Until next time, Xiao, farewell, good night and happy viewing.